What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another edition of Falcons Today. Matthew Peterson here in the studio, not in a street alley like yesterday when Jimmy Lake got fired. So let's talk about who the next defensive coordinator could be for the Dirty Birds. I've got 5 candidates that I've kind of whittled my list down to based on a combination of what's out there, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and all that stuff, which leads me to my first candidate, and that is a little bit of a familiar face. It is Jeff Ulbrich, who is the now former Jets interim head coach, but also the former defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. If you recall, back when Dan Quinn got fired, Raheem Morris was promoted to interim head coach, and Jeff Ulbrich became the Falcons DC for that brief period of time. He was also with the Falcons beforehand, so he knows the team. He knows our owner, Arthur Blank. He knows Raheem Morris, and that's most important. He knows Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris is likely going to bring someone in who he has a little bit of history with and a connection with, and ultimately, if he is the hire, I think it's a solid hire. I mean, I just circle back to what led to Jimmy Lake getting fired, and that was Raheem Morris having to do 2 jobs, be a head coach and be a defensive coordinator after the bye week. And I think with Jeff, he can trust that I do not have to do 2 jobs anymore. I can go back to just being the head coach because these two have worked together in the same circumstances. So one name to keep an eye on, he was the Jets DC before he became their interim head coach after Robert Saleh was fired. Second candidate to keep an eye on, I'm going to put Steve Wilks. He's got a lot of experience as a defensive coordinator. He was also the Arizona Cardinals head coach for 1 season. It's the most random 1-year NFL head coach. I think he was the head coach for Josh Rosen, and then they fired him and brought in Cliff Kingsbury. But Steve Wilks, a name to keep an eye on as someone who the Falcons could go to. He's not a similar background of Jeff Ulbrich, where he is a long-term DC, right? He's had lots of stops around the NFL. He was the 49ers defensive coordinator, although he wasn't a very good DC. He's the one that replaced, if I remember correctly, Robert Saleh, and then he got fired after just 1 season. So not over the moon about it, but he knows the job. He's done it for a long time, so he's a little bit more of a safe hire, if you will. Not a new name, not someone who I think is going to come in here and make Atlanta's defense top 5 or something like that, but I think you can get them out of being bottom 5, and that's pretty much what they were for much of 2024. So those are the first 2 candidates to keep an eye on, 2 guys that I think have a real good chance of becoming the next defensive coordinator for the Falcons. So let's look at the third one here, and the third candidate to be the next defensive coordinator is Dennis Allen. And I want to expand on DA being the potential next DC for the Falcons because we've seen a lot of guys go from New Orleans to Atlanta. Terry Fontenot for one, Caden Ellis, David Onyemata, so on and so forth. But first, I do have to give a quick shout out today to our sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks is super fun and super simple to use. Basketball season is heating up, and Prize Picks has you covered. You can win up to 10,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks also offers Venmo and MasterCard for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals. All you have to do is download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once more, that information is down below for you guys, so scroll on down and get started with Prize Picks today. Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's talk about Dennis Allen, because I know he's the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints, so naturally you're like, I hate that dude. But he was kind of a double agent because he really just, from within, took down the New Orleans Saints by not being a very good NFL head coach. However, I do think he's a good defensive coach. I mean, he was the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. Things didn't go very well when he was the Raiders head coach, but that's pretty much true for all Raiders head coaches. So there's that. But we're not asking him to be the Falcons head coach. We're asking him to be the defensive coordinator. And if you remember, He went from Las Vegas to New Orleans and became their DC. And if you really remember, for the longest period, the Saints had an awesome offense with Drew Brees, but the defense stunk. And as Drew Brees started to get a little bit older, all of a sudden, Cam Jordan and that Saints defense was the one starting to carry New Orleans a little bit. And that was the biggest turnaround, one of the biggest surprises. They were an offensive team that had nothing going on defense until Dennis Allen came around. Ultimately, he replaces Sean Payton in New Orleans, and say this much. He always gave Tom Brady and the Buccaneers a run for their money. I mean, he coached a Saints team that did not allow a touchdown against Brady and the Bucs. Remember that primetime game in 2021, 2022? It was like 6-3 the final in Tampa Bay. So there's one thing that Dennis Allen's good at, and that is running a defense. And once again, that is the job description. There's a lot more that goes into being an NFL head coach. I recently watched Dennis Allen do an interview. I forgot who it was with, so I'm sorry for no accreditation. But he talked about how being a head coach means putting out a lot of hats. But one of the most important jobs of being a head coach is managing people. Not everyone's good at that. You don't need to manage that much people when you're the defensive coordinator, right? When you're the DC, we're talking about managing half the roster. You're not there to be a babysitter for the quarterback or the diva wide receiver. You're there to stay in the office till 2 a.m. drawing up plays to kill the quarterback on Sunday. And that's something Dennis Allen has done a very good job of for New Orleans. So I am very much open to Dennis Allen coming to Atlanta and twice a year having some extra motivation to take down the team that fired him. Fourth candidate to watch for. This is an internal candidate, Jerry Gray. He was with the Packers for a little bit. He's been on the Falcons coaching staff. He was there, one of the few surviving coaches that survived the turnover from Arthur Smith going to Raheem Morris. And Jerry Gray, if you're looking for an internal option, would be that option. I'm looking up really quickly where he was before joining the Falcons. I think he was the Bills for a little bit. But yeah, Packers and the Vikings. That's what I was thinking of. And Bills, he was the Bills DC from 2001 to 2005. He was the Titans defensive coordinator from 2011 to 2013. And he was with the Packers after a 5-year stint in Minnesota where he was their DB's coach. So he's done the job before. It's probably time to give someone else a look at it because, strike one, strike two, you rarely get a third opportunity in the NFL. And this would be his third stint as being the DC after being the Bills DC and the Titans DC. But if you're looking for an internal option, Jerry Gray is by far the best option. So with that, we can move on to our fifth and final candidate to watch for. And this is someone that I know the chat is not raving about, but I'm going to continue to put his name out there. Lou Anarumo. I understand the Bengals just fired him, and so surface level, why would anyone want to hire someone who just got fired? And the Bengals defense this year was one of the worst in the NFL. You've got to be crazy to think that's a good candidate for Atlanta. 6 years with the Bengals, a lot of success in Cincinnati. Ultimately, I think the flop of the Bengals defense this year comes down to personnel. He was working with a team that's one of the least spending teams, and they prioritize, and understandably so, the money going to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase coming up, and they were not investing wisely in the defense. He had a lot of success with Jesse Bates, so I'm sure Bates would love to have Lou back on the sideline coaching him, but I go back to a lot of good years from the Bengals defense under Lou Anarumo, and I am willing to let the 2024 Bengals defense be, and this is a bit of a roll of the dice, don't get me wrong, an outlier, a one-off. And I just think it could be a result of 6 years. It's tough to be a coordinator anywhere for 6 years without the message getting a little redundant, things starting to go south, things getting stale. I think a change of scenery was best for both parties. And honestly, I think whatever team hires Lou Anarumo is going to be very happy about it. I think this could be something where the Bengals look back at and go, maybe that was a little bit of an overreaction to just one bad season. So It's not a popular name present day, but I'm here to say I think in 3 or 4 years, come back to this video and let's see how popular this name is. I think it's going to be more popular than it is right now. So here are 5 Jimmy Lake replacements: Jeff Ulbrich, Steve Wilks, Dennis Allen, Jerry Gray, Lou Anarumo. If I had to rank them, I'd probably go Dennis Allen 1. I really warmed up to this idea. He did such a great job with the Saints defense. They were a no-name defense until he got there. Then probably Jeff Ulbrich, then Lou, then Steve Wilks, then Jerry Gray. I just think they got to go external for this one here. All right, before we sign off, shout out your city for me. This is just a good way for me to know who watches all the way to the end of the video. So let me know down in the comment section below where you are tuning in from.